Alien girl was just cargo to them, but human risked war to bring her home. They called it Section 9, an unmarked zone in the freight decks of the Interstellar Frigate Halberd Class 7, where biological cargo was stored under cryoseal, logged by number, not name. Commander Rivenholt had no business being there. He wasn't on shift and had already been warned twice for sticking his nose where protocol said not to. But the tremor in his chest, that growing hum in his skull, had started the moment they passed the Carroll Waste and took on cargo from the black market neutral zone orbiting Charax's prime. Holt had served 20 years in Earth's stellar navy. He could read manifests like poetry and spot inconsistencies like landmines. There had been something off about the loadout. They accepted something intentionally vague. One manifest code had a biometric lock and no data packet, just a generic tag. Organic Class 7, stasis active. That wasn't protocol, that was a lie. And that was why he stood now in front of Crate 7B9, breath fogging in the freezer-thin air, hand trembling slightly as he bypassed the standard security seal with his officer override. The crate's lid hissed open with a slow, hydraulic sigh, and even before the lights inside flickered on, he felt it, a pulse in the air, like grief wrapped in starlight, like pain echoing through time. Then he saw her. She wasn't human. That was clear from the elongated limbs, the faint shimmer to her translucent skin, the fractal lattice of bioluminescence that pulsed gently beneath the dermis like fading constellations. But her form was recognizably feminine, fragile, folded inward, like someone who had curled into herself to avoid being broken further. A thin breathing tube snaked from her mouth. Her wrists and ankles were softly restrained with silken biotech. Bands too advanced for standard Navy equipment, and the stasis field hummed around her like a dying whisper. Her eyes fluttered beneath closed lids, as though dreaming beneath layers of time. Holt staggered back, throat tight. This wasn't just illegal, it was monstrous. No being sentient or not should be stored like meat and shipped without name or rights. And somewhere, beneath the logic of regulations and the thunder of duty, a question bloomed in him like wildfire. Who is she? He knew better than to touch the stasis field directly, but he ran a slow diagnostic with his handheld scanner. Brow furrowed as the readings spilled across the holoscreen. Vital signs were stable, but suppressed. Neural activity registered abnormally. High for a body in cryostasis. And beneath it all, embedded in a faint frequency pulse that barely registered a transmission signal. It repeated a single phrase in an ancient dialect of galactic standard, barely decipherable but clear enough. Do not forget her. She is the last. Holt's blood ran cold. This wasn't cargo. This was royalty. More than that, this was legacy. He remembered the old diplomatic logs from the now extinct Litherian Concord, a proud and peacekeeping race that vanished after the Draxian sieges. The princess of that empire had been declared lost, executed, but if this was her, then someone had lied on a galactic scale. His instincts screamed at him to report it. Chain of command, naval intelligence, diplomatic channels. But he knew what would happen. She would vanish again. Worse, be studied, dissected, sold, perhaps even auctioned to whichever galactic power wanted leverage over the ruins of Litherian tech. And Rivenholt had seen enough exploitation during the siege of Narvinis to last 10 lifetimes. He couldn't let that happen, even if it meant war, even if it meant turning traitor. He resealed the crate carefully and erased the scan log. Then he began his plan. The Halberd Class 7 was due to dock in the Terran Core within 48 hours. But Holt knew of a refuel point at the edge of the Arx Belt, an old asteroid base turned smuggler's depot. If he could fake a malfunction in the cryosystems, reroute the cargo transport, and offload the crate during a scheduled systems check, he might get her away. It was a long shot, treasonous, but it was possible. He spent the next day hacking, routing logs, bribing one of the deck techs to look the other way during diagnostics, and forging a security concern report about biological contamination risk that would mandate external review. His plan hinged on silence, speed, and luck, but fate, as always, had other plans. The alarm came at 3:17 ship time, a coded breach in the cargo bay. Security was already scrambling before Holt reached the lower decks. Someone else had tried to open her crate. He saw the scorch marks from a failed bypass, the partial fingerprint overlay on the seal pad, and the unmistakable residue of Draxian probe gel. That meant only one thing. Someone knew, and they wanted her dead or taken. He stood over the crate, jaw clenched. Her face was peaceful still, unaware of the chaos around her. He had to move faster, no more subtlety. No more careful plotting. He initiated an emergency evacuation protocol keyed directly to the AI command buffer. The bridge AI, confused by the override but bound by protocol, began the detachment process for cargo subpod 9 within 6 minutes. The pod was sealed, jettisoned, and guided toward the Ark's belt under the guise of quarantine. Holt slipped away, unnoticed in the scramble, already suited and ready for his EVA jump. When he launched from the secondary airlock, tethered to a micropod and steering on manual thrust, he looked back once at the enormous vessel that had carried her in silence for so long. Then he turned toward the drifting subpod, heart hammering. The asteroid station loomed like a forgotten god, abandoned, dangerous, perfect. He landed rough, skidding on magnetic clamps, dragging the crate behind him with the assisted lift gear. Inside the bunker's shadows, he powered down the stasis field gently, watching as the light receded from the alien princess's skin like dawn over dark water. Her breath caught, fluttered. Her eyes opened, and for a long moment she simply stared at him. Then, voice cracked and ancient, she whispered one word in a tongue that hadn't been spoken in 100 star cycles. His translator didn't catch it, but he understood. Home. And that was when he knew he would never let anyone take her again. She woke with a gasp that sounded more like the first breath after drowning than a return to consciousness. Her body barely moved, but her eyes opened wide enough to reveal galaxies behind them, literal constellations swirling in fractured pupils, like dying stars collapsing inward. Riven Holt, kneeling beside her in the cold chamber of the abandoned asteroid station, knew instantly that this wasn't just some lost royal or forgotten piece of alien cargo. She was someone whose presence bent reality like gravity bends space around a sun. Someone so far beyond his understanding that words failed before they even formed. Yet he didn't flinch or step back. Fear was irrelevant now. The moment her gaze met his, he understood with painful clarity that this girl had no one left in any corner of the galaxy. If he didn't protect her, she would disappear again into a lab, into a market, into war. Something ancient and instinctive rose in him then. Something older than the Navy codes etched in his bones or the chain of command burned into his career. A vow, unspoken but absolute. She would not be alone again. Not while he breathed. Not while he had 2 hands and blood left to burn. He gently eased her head into his lap, unsure if she understood the gesture but certain she could feel it. Her shaking fingers clutched weakly at the sleeve of his jacket, anchoring herself to the only thing in the universe that hadn't yet betrayed her. They stayed like that for hours beneath flickering lights and recycled air. She didn't speak, but her eyes scanned the rusted chamber, full of a quiet heartbreak. She had been woken in a world that no longer wanted her, and she knew it. It hurt in a way no medicine could reach. He activated the medkit and started flushing the cryotoxins from her bloodstream. The process was brutal. She trembled and spasmed with every wave of nerve reactivation. Holt held her through it all, murmuring soft words he didn't know if she understood. "I've got you. You're safe now. They won't find you again." Eventually her breathing stabilized. Her grip loosened. She fell into a sleep that wasn't stasis or sedation, but true rest. He stayed awake, watching her. Something had shifted. He was no longer a smuggler. No longer just a man running from the wreckage of a failed war. He was her guardian now. When she woke again, her strength had returned enough for her to sit upright. On her own, she spoke in fragments of an ancient Letherian dialect that the translator couldn't fully parse. The language was more sung than spoken, phrases layered in sound and meaning, too vast for human processing. When she pointed to herself and spoke what might have been her name, Holt repeated it carefully. "Sile," she nodded. That was when they became something more than protector and fugitive. They became companions in exile. From that moment, his plans changed. He wouldn't just hide her. He wouldn't just deliver her somewhere safe. He wanted to give her back everything they stole: her dignity, her name, maybe even her future. To do that, he'd need help. He patched the station's damaged beacon and sent an encrypted burst transmission to someone he once trusted. Rafe Donnell, ex-Navy, now a rogue AI dealer living in the gray zone between law and chaos. He owed Holt a life debt from a Black Ops mission long buried. Holt didn't explain. He just said, "Need transport, no records." Something quiet. While waiting for the reply, he taught Sile small words in Terran Basic. Water. Safe. No danger. She picked them up quickly. Her voice was fragile but steadied with each hour. She never spoke of what had happened to her, but the scars on her back told enough. Crescent-shaped burn patterns that aligned too perfectly with known restraint systems used by genetic research labs. She flinched at metallic clicks. She avoided. Mirrors, Holt didn't ask. He didn't need to. Her pain spoke louder than anything she could have said. Rafe replied faster than expected. He had a freighter, the Vesper's Echo, off-grid, unregistered, and fast enough to slip between patrol sweeps. Barely spaceworthy, but good enough. Holt carried Sile aboard that night, wrapped in an old cloak. The ship's AI asked for a destination. He didn't hesitate. He entered the coordinates for Aerolus 6, a ghost moon where Lithirian temples once stood, where maybe, just maybe, there were still records or genetic vaults left untouched by the purges. Something to prove that Sile wasn't property, that she was royalty, that she mattered. As the Vesper's Echo left the asteroid's pull and drifted into the void, Holt sat beside her in the dim cargo bay. She leaned gently against him, her eyes half closed, her breathing shallow but steady. Already, rumors were spreading on black channels, whispers of a missing classified biological asset. A rogue officer sighted near Sharaxis. Navy scouts were pinging sectors for trace signals. If they were caught now, Holt would be executed for treason. She'd vanish back into the darkness she barely survived. But when she whispered her name again, Sile, as if afraid the universe would forget it, Holt whispered back, "I know." And in that moment, he knew he'd face the entire war machine to protect her. Because to everyone else she had been cargo. But to him, she was something worth burning the stars for. They didn't make it to Aerolus 6, at least. Not the way Holt planned. The black market transponder Rafe had rigged for the Vesper's Echo worked just long enough to get them past the outer patrol lines. But the moment they entered the urgent red corridor near the Tenebra Drift, a Terran Navy gunship pinged their signature. A 3-second window just long enough for Holt to curse, push Sile behind a bulkhead, and shout for Rafe to break into full burn. The freighter jolted, too old to handle sharp maneuvers at that velocity, but it groaned through space like a wounded beast determined not to die. Sile clung to the support beams, her knuckles white, her breath ragged. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just watched him, watched the man risking everything, not because she was powerful, not because she was valuable, but because he saw her. That alone made him dangerous. That alone made him marked. The gunship hailed them. Standard. Protocol: unregistered vessel, power down immediately or be fired upon. Holt didn't answer. He steered them through a debris field left over from the Outer Ring riots. Rafe was swearing into his headset, rerouting life support to engine thrust, pushing the Vesper beyond its design limits. Hull plates peeled. The aft stabilizer failed. Sile was thrown against the wall, a bruise already blooming across her temple. Holt ran to her, pulled her behind the sealed medbay door, and said the only thing he could: "Trust me." Then he left, rerouted navigation manually, and set course for a suicide dive into the gravity well of a dying moon. The Navy wouldn't follow them there. It was too unstable. No one ever came out intact. But Holt wasn't looking to survive. He was looking to disappear. The ship skidded across the lunar dust, crashing hard enough to fracture the lower deck. Holt shielded Sile with his own body, took the brunt of the impact across his ribs, and blacked out for 6 minutes. When he woke, She was kneeling over him, sobbing silently, her hands glowing faintly, some latent gift her species never got the chance to understand before they were hunted to extinction. She healed him, or at least numbed the pain. He rose slowly, whispered thanks, and knew then that there was more to her than bloodlines or genetic signatures. She was a miracle, a survivor, and no one, not the Navy, not the buyers, not the Empire's Science Council, deserved to touch her again. They trekked through the broken caverns beneath the moon's surface, guided by old Letherian etchings only Sile could read. Hope followed without question. Each symbol she traced lit faintly under her fingers. Old bloodlines sang to her, as if the stone itself remembered her ancestors. Finally, they reached what remained of a hidden Volta crystalline archive buried beneath layers of collapsed stone. Inside were the last remaining echoes of her people's truth, genetic records, songs encoded in light. Proof of sovereignty, not servitude. Holt activated a signal burst and sent it encrypted to every neutral broadcast beacon in range. It would take days to spread, maybe weeks, but the moment it reached the right hands, the lie would be broken. Sile was not cargo, she was air, she was sacred, and she had a name the stars had tried to erase, but the Navy found them first. A dropship cracked through the sky hours later. Boots stormed the ruins. Holt stood between Sile and the armed squad, unarmed, bruised, but unshaken. "You'll have to go through me," he said. They didn't hesitate. The first shot went through his shoulder. He staggered. The second never. Landed. Sile screamed, a sound that seemed to bend time, and the ruins lit with ancient power. The stone columns pulsed. The attackers froze mid-movement, caught in some kind of psionic stasis. Holt collapsed, but not before seeing her rise, her scars glowing, her body crowned with the luminous memories of her species. She didn't destroy them. She didn't strike back. She just spoke a name, her name. Not just Sile, but her. Full title, encoded in 12 harmonic layers of ancient resonance. The stones responded. So did the sky dab above. The Navy fleet monitoring communications was flooded with the same name, her voice breaking through every frequency, crashing every AI firewall. She declared herself not as property, but as sovereign, as a rightful descendant of the Letherian highborn. Her declaration carried encoded proof pulled from the vault's core. The broadcast shattered centuries of cover-ups. Holt, bleeding and fading, saw one last thing before his vision went black. A Navy commander dropping his weapon. Eyes wide with realization, he woke in a neutral medical bay weeks later. Clean sheets, no chains. A nurse told him Sile had demanded full diplomatic asylum for him, under her authority as a recognized sovereign. She said, "You're her guardian." Holt laughed, then winced from the pain. "No," he said. "I'm just her friend." When they reunited, she was dressed in ceremonial robes, alien fabric that shimmered like fluid moonlight. She bowed her head to him, not as royalty, but as someone who had chosen family. He reached for his shoulder, pulled back the sleeve, and showed her the name he'd had tattooed across his skin. Sile Illyravelin. Her full name, her true one, no longer erased, no longer a number. She touched the ink with trembling fingers. Then she leaned in, pressing her forehead against his. Years passed. The galaxy changed. The auction blocks fell silent. The labs were dismantled. The girl who was once cargo built a new home, not a palace, but a sanctuary. Holt stayed with her. Not as a knight, not as a soldier, but as someone who believed in names, in promises, in chosen bonds. When asked what she was to him, he simply said, "She's not mine. I'm hers," and that was enough. The years did not forget them, but time, with its quiet patience, softened the scars. Holt had expected exile, or, at best, anonymity after Sile's name resounded through every beacon and system, but instead, the universe did something he didn't anticipate. It listened. Not all at once, and not without resistance. Some still called her a fugitive. Some still whispered that she was an engineered lie, a weapon in the shape of a girl. But those voices were fading now, swallowed by something stronger than fear. Truth. Holt lived with her in a quiet station nestled within a trinary star system once known only for its mining fields. They called it Orless Haven now, after the name Sile had sung when she claimed her lineage before the ruins. And in that sanctuary built from broken things, burned ships, shattered cultures, and lost names, they did not live like rulers. They lived like people who had once been hunted and still chose gentleness. She taught children how to trace the lightstone language of her people. He repaired broken tech for scavenger families that passed through. No medals, no crowns, just peace. And in that peace, they became something new. The universe, however, never truly slept. Word eventually reached them, a faction in the Terran. Outer Senate had issued a motion to nullify Sile's sovereignty. They claimed her ancestral proof was flawed, her survival a political inconvenience. It was a slow, poison-legal, procedural, almost invisible, but it would strip her protection, revoke Holt's pardon, and mark them both for capture again. Rafe, now working embedded with a quiet cell of Terran dissenters, sent them the warning and a path, one final trial, before a neutral tribunal on the archived moon of Solven Reach. If she showed, they would listen. If she didn't, she'd be declared fraud by default. Holt looked at her across the room that night. She didn't flinch. "We go," she said. They traveled light, no weapons. Just proof and memory and names burned into their skin. The tribunal was cold, clinical, surrounded by observers from every faction that had once stood silent while she was sold in chains. Holt watched her stand before them, not dressed as a princess or a leader, but in the same flight clothes she'd worn the day she'd first bled in the cargo bay. She did not beg. She did not rage. She told the truth, how she was tagged, how her sisters died before they could speak, how the humans who bought her never asked what she was, only how much. And then she pointed at Holt. "He gave me nothing but space to speak. He never asked what I could give. He called me by name when no one else remembered I had one." The chamber was silent. Then questions, dozens, some sharp, some cruel, but she met them all. And when she was done, they asked Holt to speak. He did not stand behind her. He stood beside. "You want proof?" he said. She was considered cargo. I was ordered to ignore her. I didn't, and I watched her choose mercy when she had every reason not to. That's not programming. That's not politics. That's a person. She's the best person I've ever met. The verdict came days later, recognition, full and irrevocable. Her name would be honored in the interstellar archives, her genetic line protected by treaty. She was no longer a ghost of a lost world. She was a citizen of the stars. But it was what happened next that changed everything. As they stepped off the tribunal platform, a small girl species unknown rushed up and held out a crude drawing, Sile and Holt standing beside each other, with stars in their eyes and names scrawled in every language the child could write. "You're the reason my family's free," she whispered. Sile knelt and took the picture gently, hands trembling. Holt didn't speak. He didn't need to. Back in Orless Haven, they resumed their quiet life. Not because they had to hide, but because peace was a choice now, not a condition. Sile grew older. Her species aged differently, but she aged. Her power dulled slightly, her voice softer, but her memory never faded. Holt, now silver-haired, sometimes walked the gardens, alone while she taught the newest generation. One night she found him staring at the sky, quiet. "Do you miss Earth?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "No, I never belonged there," she nodded. "Me either." Then she touched his hand. "But we belong here, together." When Holt passed, quietly in his sleep many years later, the station dimmed its lights for one full cycle. Sile didn't weep in public. But she built a chamber for him, a quiet, simple room in the center of the sanctuary garden, open to starlight. Inside it, she placed the only thing that had ever truly saved her, the maintenance uniform he'd worn the day he stood between her and a bullet and the name he tattooed for her. She pressed her palm to the wall and whispered it. Again and again. Holt. The girl who was once cargo now led a council of free worlds. Not through force, not through decree, but through memory. Every year, on the day of his death, she left the council hall and returned to the garden. She lit a flame. She said his name. And across the stars, those who had once been numbers now had names too because one man had said no and meant it.